Om Shanti. After the beautiful music, when we finished the meditation officially, and everybody was still very silent and there was a very powerful atmosphere, I was reminded of the times when we would have special sessions of meditation and spiritual understanding in Abu. And at first it used to be on top of the mountain, and then later it was in a big campus at the bottom of the mountain. And it would be a gathering of around 25,000 most times. Can you imagine 25,000 people sitting together, meditating? And some would have come in as early as 4 o'clock, and many would have come in at 5 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, but the main session would begin at 7 o'clock. And this would sometimes go on till 10:30, 11. And nobody would leave. Everybody would be held in that space. And prior to the main session at 7, there'd be different things happening. And at some point, there would be a chance for people just to get up and refresh. But people were meeting each other after maybe a year, maybe longer. And there would be a lot of gentle conversation going on. But then when the main session started at 7 o'clock, and one of our seniors would come in, the hall would be absolutely quiet to the extent that there was nobody even coughing anymore. And this used to be every few times from October through to April. So it was during the winter time. And so there'd be various people coughing and sneezing earlier. But when that meditation began, everybody would be absolutely silent and still. And so I know that one soul is able to create that atmosphere that holds everybody in silence. And I'm sure you yourselves have experienced how sometimes there can be chaos and uproar. But if you go inside and you find that space of peace and stillness, then your silence and peace is able to bring calm to others who otherwise would be running around in chaos. Have you had that experience? Yes, some have. So each one of us can do that. Each one of us can have such a deep, powerful experience of that inner peace that we can bring peace to others around us also. And when Judy asked me earlier to do this heart-to-heart conversation, the question I had in my mind is that, is there something else that I would like you to carry away, a topic in which there can be real clarity? And I know that for me, when I started my journey, the knowledge of the soul was amazing. And I think you've been introduced to that in different ways. But the second subject that we usually take up in a meditation course is the subject of the divine. And sometimes people have an allergy to the word God. Sometimes there's quite a strong reaction to the word God. So the world is such that we've been divided so much that different reactions come up in different ways. But I didn't want you to leave Peace Village without carrying away the very simple information that has come to us and that we've been working with in terms of Raj Yoga for many, many years. Just as the form of the soul is an infinitesimal point of light, can you imagine? Absolutely so tiny, you can feel it, and it lives here in the center of the forehead, but so tiny that there is no length, width, breadth, or height, but just a being that is. In the same way, the Supreme Being, the Source, also is a point of light, just an infinitesimal point of light. And it sounds very strange, because when we do believe in God, we feel that God is the Almighty, God is the one who is all-powerful, all-loving, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. We've heard all these things, and yet now it's being suggested to me that, well, actually, the form of God is just this point of light. And yet, within this point of light is an ocean of all attributes, all the powers, all the virtues, all the positive qualities that you can think of. In some traditions, they say there are 99 names of God. And yes, I'm sure if we were to sit and write, we could definitely find more than 99. And in India, they say, if you turn the whole earth into paper and you turn all the trees into quills and the ocean into ink, and you started writing the praise of God on the planet, there still wouldn't be enough space. So different expressions that put across this idea of the vastness of God, the ocean of peace, the ocean of love. And yet the source of all of that is just this point, an infinitesimal point. And I don't think I can convince anybody about this, but I do know that as soon as you come to the awareness of the soul and allow this experience of being the soul detached from the body, within the body, but having its own separate existence. And yes, soul and body work together beautifully most times. Now, sometimes they don't, but generally. And the Supreme Being, the Supreme Soul, also just an infinitesimal point. I can only suggest that you try it in your meditations and focus on that being, and you'll see what happens, because it's only through our own personal experience that we can actually say that, yes, I know what is yoga. I know what it is to connect with the divine. A priest said to Dadi at one point, Dadi, you seem to be having so much fun with God, as if God is your friend. And she said, yes, of course, he is my friend. And so, yes, definitely, I have a lot of fun. He's my companion. And so God can be mother and father and teacher and friend and guide, plus all the other things that you can think of. And so the beauty of meditation is to be able to explore each one of these different relationships. The mother with unconditional love, the father with a property and inheritance of happiness to give to us, a teacher who explains all the secrets of the universe, and in particular explains all the secrets of karma philosophy. Just as we've grown used to hearing this word yoga, but without necessarily understanding that it means connection. In the same way, we've got used to hearing this word karma, And karma in itself just simply means action. But so often when people talk about karma, they talk about it in a negative way. Well, that's their karma. And that's not so. There's good karma. And yes, there's bad karma, but there's also neutral karma. And so how that tapestry of karma works and the unseen threads behind the surface come together to create a picture of my life here and now as it is today is an incredible story. But we can understand the secrets of karma and create through the karma, which is powerful, pure, and elevated, a world that we would like to see. And it's our karma that can make that happen. God is the architect and the designer of that beautiful world, and the one who purifies the old and makes it new again. But we actually have to perform the karma that can make that world a reality. Without our engaging in action to make it happen, it doesn't happen. And so it's beautiful to spend time every day in meditation, exploring all the different facets of the personality of the being who is God. And in India, there's one word that conveys three things. And that word is Shiva. And the word Shiva conveys, the translation one would be the benefactor, the one whose existence is to give benefit and be the benefactor for all. And the second is the translation of the word Shiva, a point. And certainly in India today, within some communities, when they put a zero, they don't say zero, they say Shiva. Or when there's a deep, intense discussion that's getting a little bit out of hand, then they say Jai Shiva, say Shiva, full stop, put a full stop. And so the word Shiva, point. And the third translation, the seed, the creator, out of whom creation emerges. So think about it, and I won't say study the scriptures on it, because scriptures have a very different perspective. This is very different information that has come to us through Brahma Baba. And sometimes it's at odds with the scriptures. And so we used to get into a lot of trouble in India with that. A, because it was women who were doing the teaching. That was very new. And secondly, because some of the ideas were different to the scriptures. But now they see the work that's happened on the external, the social work that's happened. They bow their heads to it and say, well, the work that we couldn't do, Brahma Baba has done. So they don't argue with us anymore. But the reality, that being of light, a very specific being, which is very different to the idea of a presence or a being who is universal or universal intelligence or universal consciousness, but really a being with a personality with whom I can have a personal relationship. But of course, the onus of that is that once there's a personal relationship, then I also carry a responsibility to honor that relationship. When it's universal consciousness, universal intelligence, there's no such thing as personal responsibility to be honored in the same way as there is with a parent, a father, a mother, a teacher, a friend. And so a different story, a different narrative, but I leave it with you to think further and explore further at your local center, or there are Zoom classes nowadays. taking up the introduction to meditation according to Raj Yoga, and you'd be able to get a lot of understanding through those also. One of the things that I just want to mention is the whole question of outcomes. There's a very interesting passage in the Gita that talks about pure action being action that is motivated by the highest intention. So whatever action I do, that's one thing, but what is the intention behind that action? That's important. And once I've performed the action that I need to perform, that again, I need to surrender and detach and say, I've done the best that I could, and now whatever is the outcome, it might not be as I wished, but it's the right thing that will happen. And so on the one side, yes, to strive for excellence, but on the other side, where it becomes an obsession in itself, that becomes dangerous for me. But also, it then means that a huge attachment and expectation of outcome is something that's part of the story. And then when I don't see the outcome, I'm highly disappointed. And when I demand excellence from others and they don't come up to my expectations, of course, then it creates a big challenge in terms of relationships, which is why people talk about not just IQ, which is the logistics, but also EQ, emotional intelligence that deals with relationships. And then beyond EQ is SQ, spiritual intelligence. And if I begin with spiritual intelligence, then the emotional intelligence gets sorted out very, very naturally, because then even in terms of interaction, because the soul is being satisfied with its needs through the connection with the one above. So my interaction with you won't be through my expectations of what you can do for me, but rather because I'm filling myself up regularly. There was somebody who used the word recharge earlier. Silence is a method to recharge. So I'm filling myself up continually. And it means that when I enter a connection, it's not because I have a need for something from you. And so there'll be always a sweet connection instead of disappointments and expectations and the game that goes on through that. And the other thing, of course, that where today we do so much, and then we don't know how to recharge ourselves. Then there's things like compassion deficit, compassion fatigue, and people get burnout. Well, the trick is to recharge every single day. Make time for yourself so that you can recharge. Then through the day, yes, there can be a lot of giving. The traffic control system, pausing every hour for just a few minutes, that's incredibly helpful to recharge and top up the battery. But it means that I never run dry. There's no possibility of coming to a state of either stress or burnout. If I put the priority on the yoga and then the karma, otherwise creatures of doing, that came up a lot yesterday, we're creatures of doing, and so the habit is to do. But the being is that awareness of who I am and the recharging through the connection with the divine. So let me stop here and see what you would like to explore. At first, it's my thoughts moving in that direction, coming to the awareness of the soul and being stable in that awareness so that it's not the body and the things of the mundane world that pull me anymore. And then focusing on the point of light, the being who is the supreme. And at first it's just that connection with the father, the mother, the friend, the conversation. And thoughts become gradually more and more quiet. And there's more and more the experience that comes in. And at some point, then the thoughts are completely silent. And it isn't an empty silence, but it's the actual experience of the peace, the love, the truth that is within that being. And so I'm filling myself with all of these. And at the same time, it's a process in which that which is latent within me, within the soul, also begins to emerge. Thinking can be of so many different types, and it's constant, it's automatic, it's just ongoing. But pure thought, elevated thought, doesn't come just like that through thinking. It happens when you come to the awareness of the soul and you consciously create a thought. And so it's not a reaction to situations or to people. It's not a response to the things that are happening on the mundane level. It's a conscious thought that I create about my mother, my father, my friend. And so that quality of thought makes the connection. And through the connection, then there is the experience. And yes, sometimes I sit with the thought that today I'm really going to need a lot of peace. And so I begin with that thought, but it may be that it's not so much that I need peace, but I need power. And so I find that although I started with peace, what I'm actually coming to experience is like a mother knows what to give a child. The child might be asking for sweets, but the mother knows that there's something else that the child needs. And so the mother's able to provide that. And so then afterwards, I realized that, yes, it wasn't a question of just peace. It was actually power. And I received that, even though I hadn't been able to articulate it. But that experience comes.
So what's power?
So
What is power?
power is that state where my own inner capacity has grown and I'm able to deal with things in a different way than I would have otherwise. And you can see that change happening within yourself, but also you see the change happening in others. And so definitely it's a strength that comes that allows me to go through challenges in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. Any different types of power. Another topic, another time. Leave it. In 1936, this man who was quite happy and comfortable in his life, he'd achieved a lot through his own hard work. He was the son of a village schoolmaster, so simple life. But he went through life, he left school very early, wasn't interested in just sitting and studying books. And he started as working in a grain merchant store. And his intellect was brilliant. So he rose up through the ranks and he started working in a jewelry store. And within that, his loyalty, honesty, acumen just was recognized, and he was doing work in a different way. His awareness of jewelry and creativity, but also the value of gems was exceptional. And he became a partner in that jewelry business, the respect of the community and a loving family, everything, everything was going. But also very deep devotee, a lot of devotion in a very traditional way. But what was unusual was that he had a whole series of gurus. Normally people have one guru and that's for life. But he would have one guru and would want to learn more. And the guru would offer him the possibility of going to another one. And he had a series of 12 gurus, but each one with love and respect, allowing him to move further and further. And without any expectation, for the last couple of years, his daughter-in-law would tell us these stories about him. And she said how the last couple of years before the transformation, he would be spending a lot of time in introspection and silence. And then around the age of 60, he had a series of visions. One was a vision of the form of God as light. Another was a vision of a four-armed figure, that Vishnu, that would normally be considered an incarnation of God. And he heard very strange words, Tattvam Asmi, you are this, you are he. Didn't make any sense of that. Then the third vision he had was of the modern world going through a huge amount of turmoil and trouble, natural disasters, civil war, the whole works. And he saw what seemed to be like souls' points of light going up above to a world of light. And after some time, it was as if the whole earth had been renewed and souls were coming down and taking on a physical form. And it was a human form, but it seemed to be not of bones and flesh. It seemed to be a body of light, light radiating. And when these beings would meet each other, they would communicate mostly through the eyes. But when they spoke, it was words that were like poetry. When they moved, it was like a dance. And everything seemed to be working in perfect rhythm, perfect harmony. Humans and animals and nature, everything just beautiful, fresh, green, a new world, a human world, but a world with light. And he heard the words, you must create such a world. And he couldn't find answers because he didn't understand what he had seen. I'm putting it quickly, but it was slow. One vision and another one and another one. And so he went away and spent time in solitude, a few months. And it gradually came to him that the way that a better world could come about would be through education, spiritual education. And he understood that the original form of the human spirit is the deity form, divine, filled with divine virtues. And it was possible to again come back to that. He understood that it was Shiva who was communicating with him. And that knowledge gradually came through. And so through 1937 and then the period of isolation that I had mentioned, intense meditation, gradually things were being clarified. And then in the 50s, when they came to India and settled there, more and more knowledge was being given all the way through until departure 1969. And so that whole period of time, Brahma Baba would be speaking every day, morning and evening. And the knowledge that was coming through was the sort of things that we've been sharing with you. the teachings of the soul, God, karma philosophy, the cycle of time, all the things. And so my understanding and my experience was that Shiva was speaking through Brahma Baba. And when Brahma Baba left the physical form in 1969, again, I was there when the whole period of the cremation, etc., was happening. And after the cremation, it was quite an incredible experience when there was a channeling through a trance medium, and more aspects of practical application of these things were being shared. And so this is the story. And as I say, think about it, take it, leave it as you choose. When we started Call of Time, and Daddy Jayanti gave so much personal attention to every single session that we would have, we would ask her the question, here's a group of 25 people, and you leave behind 25,000 people who want your attention in India, and you come outside India to meet 25 people, and you give them 4 days of your time, morning till night. Why are you doing this? And she would say to us that each one who comes to these events is an instrument to serve 100,000 others. So I'm going to put the question right back to you. How do you amplify? And all of you have expertise and experience in all of these matters more than certainly myself. And even Sister Gayatri, both came to Baba very young. And whatever we've learned in terms of the world out there, as well as spirituality, has been since we've been with Baba. So we don't know about marketing, we don't know about PR, we don't know about any of these things, but all of you know about these things in different ways, so up to you. Many of the questions, it's not one question you've put. It's,
yeah, I know I did. I do
a
apologize.
string.
But
No,
there's
that's
somehow...
okay. What we usually do is take things in a very systematic way, take up the knowledge of soul, the knowledge of God, the knowledge of time, the cycle, the knowledge of karma, the knowledge of meditation, each step by step by step, so that things gradually become more and more clear. But I'll attempt to answer your questions. There's a very interesting word they use in India for Shiva. They say Swambhu, the one who is self-created. And in fact, we would say that there are 3 things that are eternal and immortal. And eternal means no beginning, no end. And if you put it into a design, it turns out to be a circle, a cycle. And so no beginning and no end. And this applies to soul and God and this human world of matter. And when I experienced the soul, then there was a very beautiful experience in which I could feel that there is no such thing as a beginning and an end, just eternity. And that made me understand the cycle being eternal also, because the cycle is the soul coming into matter and playing its role on the world stage, in the world of matter. And so the eternal soul and eternal matter, and you have the story of the cycle. And I think it was yesterday or the day before, maybe, when we were talking about creation, recreation, co-creation. When things get into a mess and nobody has answers and nobody finds the way out of that mess, there comes a moment when once within the whole history of the cycle, there is direct intervention by the divine, so that knowledge that has been forgotten, we had it, but we lost it. And so that knowledge is again revealed, and that knowledge is then shared with whoever wants to hear it. And that knowledge becomes the foundation for, again, the renewal, the recreation. And so I know that that leaves lots and lots of more questions rather than more answers, but I'm just giving you a sort of summary of these ideas. But definitely, I invite you to take the introductory course of meditation, which is offered in many, many different ways, online, in person, at all the different centers. And I think many of you have come through contact with a center. And so the center would be able to tell you what can work for you in terms of time and whatever method is the easiest for you. Yeah. I hope you're going to be able to sleep tonight. My experience is that when there is that state of soul consciousness, then things move very smoothly. And things that otherwise one would perceive to be a hurdle don't stay a hurdle. It's very easy. And so that manifestation of pure thought begins to happen in a very natural way. And yes, there's a connection with everybody, because your vision is that of seeing each one as that light that's shining in the forehead. And so there's no separation in that sense. Yes, you have your own personal identity, but in this vision of soul consciousness, there's an affinity in which, because we are seeing the original pure state of the soul, then you're not caught up in any of the externals of color and gender and so on, but there's a connection that you feel of human to human, being to being. And so, yes, it's a very real experience when you go beyond the consciousness of the body. I think what you're talking about is that state of detachment in which it's the inner being that you're experiencing. I'm calling it soul consciousness, and you're using it as the word transcending thinking and so on. So I think we're talking about the same thing. Of souls. And when there's a very deep connection, you have the sense of knowing what's happening to the other without being able to understand it in terms of logic and reason, because there's been no communication by telephone or any external way, but there's that connection of thoughts and love. It happens between humans and animals. There was a lady who came to London with her husband just to be with us for a short time visiting. And she suddenly had a heart attack and passed away. And the husband felt very supported by the whole family that was there. And a few months later, I went to India and I visited their home, which happened to be very close by to our headquarters. They'd moved from South India to get a house, especially to be near the community. And I met their two dogs. I'm remembering stories of dogs from before, but Roberta's dog. And this particular dog apparently for 3 days before the person had died, had stopped eating and was just sitting on her bed and wasn't moving. And that wasn't the normal way that creature was, very lively, very loving. And so that dog was so attached to this lady that it picked it up 3 days before. The people who'd been looking after him told the husband on his return that this is what had happened. So human to human, there's a connection. Human to animals, there's a connection. Human to God, there's a connection. And so human souls are able to communicate without words, without telephones. And that is the power of yoga. How do I communicate with God? It's the power of thought, the power of love.
I just want to acknowledge, I know that a few of you have made an appointment.
Organizations make the headlines. It's usually scandals, touch wood. So we've been safe and protected from that so far because, again, those are usually about sex or money. And our lifestyle is a very different lifestyle. So I can see why there's low profile. And it's just meant that change happens in a very natural way. Growth happens in a natural way. When Jayanti came to London, there were just 2 centers outside India, one in London and a tiny, tiny one in Hong Kong. That's it. And by the time she came back to settle in India, we had the affiliation with the UN, general consultative status with the UN, and we existed in 120 countries. And all these things had happened in 40 years, which is usually much more than a multinational would be able to manage. And so the growth has happened as it will according to God's plan. And whatever further happens, wait and see.
Sister Jayanti.
Scars means the imprint that's left on the soul as a result of action that's been performed. So the cycle that goes on in here is thought from the mind, the intellect making a decision whether to do it or not, the filter, and then the action. And the action has the impact outside in terms of karma, but the action also has an impact inside in terms of the pattern that it leaves. And the thought that comes when the sanskars are triggered by whatever, sight, sound, taste, anything. And so the mind responds to the sanskars being triggered. And so the thoughts that come up are accordingly. A classic example is if I've been bitten by a dog, then that imprint is there in my sanskar. And so next time I see a dog, I'm going to either want to hit it or I'm going to run, bite or flee. But if in my experience, dogs are beautiful creatures and I love them and I get on with them, then that imprint in my sanskars is already there. So when I see a dog, I'll reach out to stroke them. I won't run. And so sanskars are created through action. And the beautiful thing is that what we now understand is that sanskars definitely can change. At the moment, most people would have a mixture, a combination of good and not so good sanskars, but through the intellect becoming divine and actions coming through that are pure actions, the imprint can change. And so the sanskars can be purified and become divine. And so where science confirms that the brain has plasticity, which is a fairly new discovery, fairly new. The early days, they all thought that, whatever is the imprint is forever. But now we know that that's not true. But that reflects what spirituality told us earlier than science told us, that sanskars can change. And then later, science has confirmed that that is true.